When you think about it, pollution is everywhere. It's in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and yeah, even in the sounds we hear all day long. So much of it is totally invisible. But its impact? Oh, its impact is anything but. Okay, let's dive into the staggering reality of what pollution is really doing. Let's start with a number. 9 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how many people die every single year because of pollution. A huge study by the Lancet Commission found that this accounts for about 1 in every 6 deaths around the globe. It's a number so big it's kind of hard to even process, but it points to an absolutely massive global health crisis. So, what are we even talking about when we say pollution? Well, at its very core, it's pretty simple. It's just what happens when harmful stuff, contaminants, get into our natural environment and cause damage. And this isn't just about chemicals. It can be energy, like sound or heat, that messes with the quality of our world. Okay, that 9 million figure, it's almost too big to wrap your head around, right? So to really get a handle on its scale, let's put it into perspective. Let's compare it to some of the other major global health threats that we hear about all the time. Think about this. Pollution kills 3 times more people than AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. Now, we rightly dedicate huge amounts of global attention and resources to fighting those diseases, but this comparison just goes to show you that pollution is a far deadlier and often a much quieter threat. In the Lancet Commission, they really don't mince words. They call pollution one of the great existential challenges of our time. I mean, that's heavy. Existential. They're saying it's a threat not just to you or me, but to the actual systems that support all of human life. The takeaway here is pretty clear. This isn't some minor issue. It's fundamental to our survival. So, to really understand how pollution can be so pervasive, but also so easily overlooked, let's zero in on a type that most of us deal with every single day. But we probably don't think of it as a serious threat. Let's talk about noise. This quote from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, just hits the nail on the head. Unlike a sky full of smog or a dirty river, noise pollution is, well, it's intangible. It's all around us, but because we can't see it or smell it, it's so easy to just dismiss it as a simple annoyance. But what happens when that annoyance is just constant? What are the real, actual consequences for our health and our well-being when our world is never quiet? Well, the EPA's definition is about as simple as it gets. Noise is just unwanted or disturbing sound, but it becomes pollution when that sound starts interfering with our lives. When you can't sleep or you can't even have a conversation. That's when it starts to chip away at our quality of life. And that simple annoyance quickly builds up into very real, very serious health problems. We're talking about things like stress-related illnesses, high blood pressure, and of course, hearing loss. But it also leads to stuff you might not connect to noise right away, like constant sleep disruption and even lost productivity at work. All right, now let's pull the camera back out. We've talked about the unseen threat of noise, so let's look at the more visible costs, the damage from air and water pollution. And the impact here is just as direct and, frankly, just as devastating. I mean, look at the specific effects here. Air pollution is a huge driver of respiratory problems and heart disease. Contaminated water, it led to 1.4 million premature deaths in 2019 alone. And then you have things like lead and heavy metals, which can cause severe neurological damage, especially in kids. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. These impacts are not felt equally across the board. Children whose bodies are still growing and developing, and the elderly, they are so much more vulnerable to the diseases and developmental problems that come from being exposed to these pollutants. Okay, so given how massive this problem is, what has actually been done about it? Well, the fight against pollution isn't new. It has a long history, and a lot of that history was forged in the wake of absolute disasters. This timeline shows a really clear pattern. First, a catastrophe happens, like London's Great Smog back in 1952 that killed thousands of people. And then, that disaster spurs action, like the UK passing its first Clean Air Act. We saw a similar thing in the United States, where growing awareness led to the creation of the EPA in 1970, which was quickly followed by these huge landmark laws to control air, water, and yes, even noise pollution. And hey, speaking of noise pollution, it's a perfect case study for how these regulations can change over time.
Back in 1981, the US government decided that noise problems were really best handled at the local level. So they shifted the main responsibility away from the federal EPA. It's a great example of that ongoing debate over what's the best way to tackle all these different kinds of pollution.
Which really brings us to our final and maybe most important question. We know that pollution is the planet's single largest environmental killer. We know it's responsible for 9 million deaths a year. And we've seen that historically, major action often only comes after a tragedy. So the question we have to leave you with is this. Are the solutions we have today really, truly rising to meet the scale of this silent global threat?